So you become an atheist and you tell yourself what don't exist in you can't exist outside of you. Or you become a non-believer because you don't believe in yourself, so you don't believe outside of yourself. So if you're an atheist who don't believe in anything, or a non-believer who don't know what to believe, my wife's first pregnancy was supposed to be a natural birth, but it ended up being a C-section. Once she received the epidural, they began to do an emergency operation. She started yelling because she could still feel the scalpel cutting into her skin. The epidural is supposed to prevent you from feeling anything. It's supposed to eliminate all pain. Shortly after that, that's when that good stuff kicked in, and she was out. She went to sleep. That's the last thing she remembered, is going to sleep. Next thing she remembered was waking up. Over the years, they asked the question, is it safe to have a vaginal birth after a C-section? Because a surgical cut results in a scar on the uterus, and the concerns have been raised that the pressure of the labor could cause the uterus to open up and rupture along the scar, causing the mother to bleed out or to cause harm to the baby. But however, according to the American Pregnancy Association, it published studies that show that 60 to 80% of women who had a C-section birth can actually have a successful vaginal birth in the next pregnancy. And my wife was one of those successful ones. During the second birth, my son was born on the way to the hospital. We were actually scheduled to have a C-section, but he decided he wanted to come out in the car. So the third pregnancy, by the time it was my daughter, my oldest daughter, my wife decided to go strong black back in the day style. No epidural, no pain medicine, superwoman, straight superwoman style. She wanted to experience every feeling like in the previous birth with my son, who decided to come out on the front seat on the way to the hospital in a moving car. So all was going as planned until it wasn't. The labor pains became so intense that she started begging for an epidural. All that strong black back in the day, man, that was over with. Superwoman lifted her cape so they could stick that epidural in her spine. First, she had to sign a waiver stating that if anything went wrong, we couldn't hold the hospital responsible for malpractice. So that was the first red flag to me. At this point, she just wanted the pain to stop. It was unbearable. The first time they inserted the catheter, they did it wrong. So this was the second red flag for me. They had to take it out and reinsert it. By the time they inserted the epidural catheter into her back the second time, the baby had already started coming out. So they had to remove the catheter, but it was in her back. So the catheter started to fill with blood. So they had to cap it to stop the blood from pouring through it. See, that was the third red flag. I was over there. I was going through it. See, I was standing by her bedside, but everything started becoming so surreal. I got hot. I started feeling faint. I was really lightheaded. The nurse, she looked at me and she read my body language. She said, "Sir, if you pass out, I will not forgive you." So anyway, when the baby hairs start to come through the vaginal canal, it's called crowning. And the mother actually feels burning, tearing, stabbing. All this is associated with the crowning process. If the epidural was successfully administered, she would have been numb to the pain. The nervous system would have been prevented from transmitting the signal to alert the brain that it should respond to pain in the area it was hurting. See, many times we're successful at becoming numb to the areas we experience hurting. When things become too painful and too intense, we want to separate ourselves from our feelings and disconnect from anything that causes us to respond to pain. That led me to an article that I read, and it asked the question, do believers and non-believers' brain work differently? So I read a story. It said that the believers and the non-believers' brain actually work different. It suggests that the number of people who show interest in religion is decreasing and the church attendance is sharply declining. It asks the question, is the human brain evolving away from religiosity? See, religiosity is a strong religious feeling or belief. People don't strongly feel in religion, or they don't strongly believe in anything anymore. It explained that religion has been a durable feature in the world's culture, and anthropologists estimate that 18,000 different gods, goddesses, and various animals and objects have been worshipped by humans since our species began. It states that spirituality must have once offered something that was once tangible to human survival. So in other words, mass majority of us feel like we don't need religion to survive. This study suggests something have clearly changed in the past few decades that underlines the increase in non-believers. The study cites that not believing in God is due to some type of activation of distinct higher brain activity. It says that non-believers are more likely to use more deliberate and analytic reasoning. It says non-believers are more likely to process sensory information. Sensory information is something that you see. It says that non-believers are more likely to process sensory information in a more deliberate manner than people that actually believe. It says non-believers use this higher cortical area of their brain for reasoning. This is called the top-down processing. Top-down processing. It claims, on the contrary, religious believers are more likely to interpret visual information in a more emotional and intuitive manner called bottom-top. Intuitive is based on what one feels to be true, even without conscious reasoning. So if you trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean out on your own understanding, you may be accused of being unreasonable. Studies show that the brain of the believers, with this study, show that the brain of the believers doesn't operate on a conscious reasoning, but on emotional feelings. So our brain function by processing from the bottom top. When praises go up, blessings go down. Okay, anyway, it finds that non-believers have a distinctive higher order brain activity. So these higher cortical areas of the brain that non-believers involve is called top-down processing. It suggests that if believers and non-believers are looking at the same set of circumstances, that the non-believers will use their higher brain power to tap into a higher part of the brain that allows them to analyze the situation with reasoning, and believers will simply rely on feelings. This study is disrespectful, and it reduces the movement of the spirit to a feeling. And this article was clearly written by an atheist that's insecure in their belief. So let's break it down. They say that the believers have an ancient brain because we serve an ancient God that made promises in ancient days. And we're still receiving ancient blessings in these present days because he said, I am, that I was, that I will be. See, the evolution of the human brain, which I refer to as the deterioration of the human brain, it actually evolved away from religiosity before the last few decades that are the focus and the scope of this study. See, back before the number of people that show interest in religion decreased, and back before the number of people attending church declined, the human brain evolved away from religiosity in the Garden of Eden. This happened when they ate the forbidden fruit with the intentions on becoming like God. See, when this study concluded that not believing in God is due to the activation of some type of distinct higher order brain activity, I wonder if the writer even read Genesis. Because when Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden tree, they were promised a higher order brain activity would be activated. He said, you will be like God, knowing both good and evil. In Genesis 3:6, it told a story of how Eve, she was convinced. She saw the tree, that it was beautiful. The fruit looked delicious. She wanted the wisdom that the tree would give her that the serpent promised. So she took some of the fruit, she ate it. Then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it too. At that moment, their eyes were open and they suddenly felt shame at their nakedness. So they sewed fig leaves together to cover themselves. See, they received the wisdom and the intellectual independence apart from God that they desired from eating that fruit. That higher order brain activity, it was activated, but it came with a curse. That curse was packaged as a gift, and it had a no return, no exchange policy. What they wanted up top, it brought them down the bottom. See, circumstances and life events presented to non-believers, it exposed how naked they are. So the higher order brain activity is just their cortical response to their eyes becoming open. As these days we call it being woke. And the way they reason and analyze is their very own process of sewing fig tree leaves together to cover themselves from what they are exposed to so that they don't feel ashamed of being naked, exposed. See, Eden, it was a shelter that the Lord provided. In Psalms 91:1, it said, "Those who dwell in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty." See, a shadow is a dark shape produced by a body coming between rays of light and the surface. When the rays of God light shine on the people that's a part of the body of Christ, we receive the light, but the shadow is cast onto the surface. So God light shine on our body. As a result of his light shining on our body casts a shadow. And that shadow is the dark reflection of our image that we see on the ground. See, darkness doesn't recognize light, but it recognizes the shadow that our body casts to the ground because darkness accepts darkness. The light shined in darkness and darkness comprehended not. You are the image of God and your shadow is an image of you. Your shadow only appears when you're in the presence of light. When everything starts going good in life, that's when all the bad people pop up. Shadows. See, the light undresses you from your shadow, allowing you to be exposed to the naked truth and not be ashamed. See, non-believers, they're said to be more cognitive and less intuitive, more head and less heart, headstrong but emotionally weak, more judgmental and less compassionate. They compensate in mental intelligence what they lack in emotional intelligence. This is the deficiency of having a top-down processing disorder. When Jesus gave up his life on that cross, the veil of the temple was split in two from top down. God said, "I'm from above. You're from beneath. My thoughts are higher than yours. My ways are higher than yours." So that false height that your high order brain activity is covering the veil that's blinding you from seeing the path of righteousness. See, believers, we're comfortable with a blindfold on because we walk by faith and not by sight. The Spirit gave me a word in a foreign tongue, ashad. See, the word ashad is mostly used in the Middle East and in parts of Asia. So I looked up ashad, and ashad means better guided. The best guided. So I find that encouraging because as a follower of Christ, I feel like I am the best guided. And even with a blindfold on, I feel that I'm better guided than a non-believer with 20/20 vision. Non-believers may not worship a god or goddesses or any of the various animals or objects that account for the 18,000 that the anthropologists estimate the human species worship since our species began. But God said, "I am a jealous God, and you should have no other God before me. I am the I am. Ihiyah, Asher Ihiyah. Tell the children of Israel, I am sent you. This is my name forever, and a memorial to all generations." Ihiyah means I exist. I have a forever God. His name is the I am. He endured through all generations. So to answer the question, is the human brain evolving away from religiosity? Yes, it is. It's evolving away from the 18,000 gods, goddesses, animals, and other objects mankind worship since being expelled from the Garden of Eden. See, we worship because we're created to worship. Everyone worships something, even if it's their own image. Our image is made after God's image. So if you worship your image, you worship the creation instead of the creator. Heaven, earth, and all creations shall pass away. And the only three things that will remain is hope, faith, and love. And God is love. So if you're an atheist who don't believe in anything, or a non-believer who don't know what to believe, truth is, you're experiencing emptiness. You can't feel what you're numb to. It's not that you can't feel, it's the complete opposite. You feel a range of emotions, from loneliness, sadness, feelings of disconnect, feelings of numb. See, numbness is a feeling. It's a direct response to loss, trauma, and other difficult life events. This feeling is a numbing agent that prevents what's down inside you from coming up. It stops what's in the heart from getting to the brain. Numbness is the epidural needle that injects itself into your processing sensory, which prevents you from having the down to top processing experience. Without emotional intelligence, you can't respond to feelings. Lack of emotional intelligence, it numbs you to the fact that feeling emptiness doesn't mean that you're actually empty. It actually is the opposite. An epidural is usually given to a woman, like my wife, in childbirth. It's a plastic tube called an epidural catheter inserted into your spine. They warn you that if you move the wrong way, you can become paralyzed. It's possible that you will never feel again. And some of y'all that's experiencing pain don't ever want to feel again. See, what it does is it blocks the nerves that carry pain messages to the brain. Pain relief medication is given through the catheter. If you have an epidural catheter in your heart that medicates the signal of pain that your heart is trying to send to your head, you need to be healed, not medicated. See, numbness is a feeling associated with emptiness. Numbness is the epidural of emptiness. Before you can receive an epidural, it's standard that the area that the epidural will be inserted in, it has to be numb with an anesthetic. In other words, what we do is we first try to ignore the pain, and then we pretend it doesn't exist. And then you get so good at pretending that your pretend becomes permanent. As a permanent pretender, you become a make-believer. Being that God created you and you tell yourself, God is now make-believe. But God created you and not your make-believes. So you become an atheist and you tell yourself what don't exist in you can't exist outside of you. Or you become a non-believer because you don't believe in yourself. So you don't believe outside of yourself. See, that's that top-down non-believer processing. And Jesus said this: when you hear what I say, you will not understand. When you see what I do, you will not comprehend. For the hearts of these people are hardened, and their ears cannot hear, and they have closed their eyes, so they cannot see, and their hearts cannot understand, and they cannot turn to me and let me heal them. See, but then we got the bottom top believers. And he said, blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. I tell you the truth. This is what Jesus said. Many prophets and righteous people long to see what you see, but they didn't see it. And they long to hear what you hear, but they didn't hear it. So this is what I got to say to the believers. If Jesus said many prophets and righteous people long to see and hear, but they didn't, I say that many prophets and righteous people in these days are like the prophets and righteous people in those days, still longing to see what the disciples seen because we haven't seen it, and still longing to hear what the disciples heard because we haven't heard that word from God. See, but John 4:48, Jesus said, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. That applied to us now like it applied to them back then, even the disciples. See, we have that seeing is believing syndrome. Thomas had to see Jesus' scars before he believed in the resurrection. But he replied, I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, unless I put my fingers inside of him and place my hand inside the wound on his side. But Jesus said to Thomas, put your fingers here. Look at my hands. Put your hands into my side. Don't be faithless any longer, but believe. And Thomas' response was, my Lord, my God. See, it's crazy because at that moment, Thomas truly became saved. He truly became born again. He walked with God that whole time. He walked with Jesus that whole time. But he still wasn't saved. Many of us walk with Jesus. Many of us walk with God and we're still not saved. Just because you walk with him don't mean you saved. Thomas said, my Lord, my God. And the Bible says that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. See, Thomas wasn't saved until he confessed with his mouth, my Lord, my God, because he finally believed in his heart. See, Thomas confessed with his mouth when he said, my Lord, and he believed in his heart when he said, my God. Will you confess with your mouth and believe with your heart? See, Thomas admitted that he was a non-believer. It's possible for us to walk with Jesus as disciples and still not believe. Sometimes we get that Thomas syndrome. We lose faith in our belief until Jesus showed us that he exists in a way that's satisfying to our standards. Until then, we refuse to believe. What are the scars that you need to see first? A scar is a mark that's left behind from a wound that's healed. Many of us still have open wounds. See, Thomas seen the wounds that Jesus died from on the cross, but he needed to see the marks left behind from the wounds of Jesus being healed. He needed to see those scars before he believed. Come to Jesus so he can turn your wounds into scars. If you are a non-believer or atheist or a disciple who walked with God like Thomas, but something happened that caused you to lose belief in your heart, although you still believe in your head, I want you to give your life to Christ today. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Let the words of your mouth echo the beliefs in your heart. Thomas said 4 words, my Lord. Jesus then told him, because you have seen, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen, yet have believed. Will you believe?